So when you think of the Roaring Twenties, what comes to mind? I bet it's flappers, jazz music, maybe a booming stock market, right? It's this picture of freedom and good times. But that's not the whole story. Not by a long shot. Just beneath that shiny surface, a totally different America was fighting for its life, one full of fear, anxiety, and a deep-seated culture war.
I want you to picture this. It's a ridiculously hot July day in a tiny town in Tennessee. The streets are absolutely packed. You've got reporters from all over the world, preachers holding court on street corners, and just thousands of curious people. You can practically feel the tension in the air, and it feels like the whole world is leaning in, listening to their radios.
Now, on paper, this was all about a young high school teacher, John T. Scopes, who got in trouble for breaking a new state law. But everyone there knew this was about something way, way bigger. This trial was the flashpoint, the place where all these anxieties that had been bubbling up across the country were about to explode.
All right, so let's get into it. The Scopes trial, or as everyone called it, the trial of the century, was more than just a court case. It was a full-blown spectacle that put two completely different visions of America on trial for everyone to see.
And this wasn't just any local prosecutor versus some small-town lawyer. No way. This was a clash of the titans. In one corner, you had Clarence Darrow, the most famous defense attorney in America, a brilliant speaker and a total skeptic. And in the other corner, William Jennings Bryan, a political legend, a three-time presidential candidate, and the voice of a populist, Bible-believing America. Their showdown was about everything: faith, science, and what America was going to be in the new century.
Okay, but why? Why did this one trial in Tennessee suddenly become the national obsession? To get that, we need to zoom out and look at what was happening across the country. Because the 1920s weren't just roaring for everyone. For a whole lot of people, they were really, really unsettling.
You see, America was changing, and it was changing fast. You've got millions of new immigrants coming in from places like Italy and Poland, with different languages, different religions. At the very same time, the Great Migration is happening, with hundreds of thousands of African Americans moving from the rural South to northern cities. For a huge slice of the white Protestant population, especially in small towns, it really felt like the country they knew was just slipping through their fingers.
And that anxiety? It had to go somewhere. The first place it really exploded was in this powerful anti-immigrant movement called nativism. It was this intense backlash, and it was all fueled by a deep suspicion of anyone who seemed foreign.
Just listen to these words from Bartolomeo Vanzetti. He and another man, Nicola Sacco, were Italian immigrants and known anarchists. In 1927, they were both executed for a murder that the evidence for was shaky at best. Their case became this huge international symbol of America's fear of radicals and foreigners. This fear wasn't just talk either. It was written into law. This number, 2%, was the core of the National Origins Act of 1924. So what does this mean? It meant that immigration from any country was capped at just 2% of the number of people from that country who were already here way back in 1890. And here's the kicker. It was a formula specifically designed to choke off immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe while keeping the door open for folks from Northern Europe.
But the fight wasn't just against outsiders. Oh no, there was another battle brewing, a kind of civil war, right inside American Protestantism. And this fight leads us straight back to that sweltering courtroom in Tennessee. So on one side, you had the modernists. They believed that faith had to evolve with the times. They said, hey, science is telling us new things, and we can see parts of the Bible as beautiful metaphors. But on the other side, you had the fundamentalists. They argued that the Bible was the literal, 100% true Word of God from cover to cover. No errors, no exceptions. You can see, right? This wasn't a small disagreement. It was a total clash over what truth even means.
So, the fundamentalists decided to fight back, and they used politics to do it. The Butler Act in Tennessee was their creation. It flat out made teaching evolution, or anything that went against the biblical story of creation, illegal in the state's public schools. And this is the law that John T. Scopes got caught breaking.
And then came the moment that everyone remembers, the big showdown. Darrow does something absolutely unheard of. He calls the lead prosecutor, William Jennings Bryan, to the stand to be cross-examined as an expert on the Bible. Darrow then proceeded to tie Bryan in knots, asking him if he believed Jonah was literally swallowed by a whale. It was just a brutal cross-examination, and in the court of public opinion, it was a total disaster for the fundamentalist cause.
But believe it or not, there was a third and much, much darker movement gaining steam in the 1920s. And this is when the second Ku Klux Klan went national.
So how did this happen? Well, it all starts with this blockbuster silent film called The Birth of a Nation, which totally glorified the original Klan from the 1860s. The movie was a sensation and inspired the Klan's rebirth in 1915. But this new version was different. It was savvy. It used modern marketing, paid recruiters, and grew from a small Southern hate group into a massive national organization.
And this new Klan, well, it had a much bigger enemies list. Of course, it was still viciously anti-black, but they also went after immigrants, Catholics, and Jews. But it didn't stop there. They also targeted feminists, atheists, bootleggers, pretty much anyone who didn't fit their very narrow, very specific idea of 100% American. They sold themselves as the guardians of traditional values.
And if you're thinking this was just a problem in the South, you'd be wrong. Dead wrong. The Second Klan was a massive force up north and out west. It had huge followings in places like Indiana, Colorado, and Oregon, often controlling city halls and state legislatures.
So get ready for this number. At its peak in the mid-1920s, the Klan had between 4 and 5 million members. Let that sink in. This was not some fringe group of extremists. This was a mainstream movement made up of middle-class white Protestants who saw the Klan as a respectable civic club that was protecting their way of life.
So you've got these three massive reactionary movements running at full steam. What happened to them? Well, by the end of the decade, their power just evaporates, almost as fast as it appeared.
The collapse was pretty stunning. The Klan? It got torn apart by disgusting scandals and infighting, and its membership plummeted. Fundamentalism? After the Scopes trial, it kind of retreated from the big national debates. Nativism? Well, they got their immigration laws passed, so their main cause lost its urgency. And then, of course, the Great Depression hit, and suddenly everyone was a lot more worried about having a job than about cultural issues. But here's the thing. Even though the big organizations faded away, those anxieties that started everything, they didn't just vanish into thin air.
So when you look back, the Roaring Twenties really wasn't just one story. For every step forward into this new, modern, diverse America, there was this huge, organized, and sometimes violent push backwards. It was really about two different Americas, locked in a battle for the nation's future.
And that's what I want to leave you with. You know, the specific fights from 100 years ago over evolution and immigration, they might feel like ancient history. But that underlying tension, that battle between two very different ideas of what the nation should be, has that ever really gone away?